Hi, this is Lao Wan. Welcome again to my show. This week, video has recently resurfaced of House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi in an altercation with protesters outside of her house. Protesters were with the group Code Pink, and they were picketing Representative Pelosi's house in San Francisco to agitate for a ceasefire in Gaza when the House Minority Leader allegedly yelled at the protesters to go back to China. Here's the clip.
The Democrats want the ceasefire. The Democrats want the ceasefire. I have no connection with China.
Pelosi is allowing the murder of thousands of people.
She said we should talk to China because we're China supporters. I guess she fell for that New York Times article, or maybe she planted it, that Code Pink is controlled by the Chinese government, which is a load of bullshit.
We did this because we've been trying to get Pelosi to sit at the peace table with us since 2007. She's not been willing to talk to peace activists in any meaningful way since then. That's 16 years that we're trying to get Pelosi to speak with us. Horrible, atrocious massacring is going on in Gaza, and Lydia and I felt that we needed to let Pelosi know how deeply passionate we are against what's going on, that Pelosi condones, supports, abets Israel's massacre of Gaza.
And I've seen a lot of weaponization of the Holocaust to basically legitimize another genocide, and that's just what makes this situation so perverse and disgusting. It's not only that we're allowing a genocide, but some people are basically saying that other people deserve a genocide.
This comes as House Minority Leader Pelosi diminished CNN host Dana Bash's concerns that the Biden administration's support for Israel may lead young progressive voters to stay at home. Pelosi suggests that some pro-Palestine protesters may be connected to Russia. Here's a clip of Pelosi talking to Dana Bash.
So let's address that. But for them to call for a ceasefire is Mr. Putin's message. Mr. Putin's message. Make no mistake, this is directly connected to what he would like to see. Same thing with Ukraine. It's about Putin's message. I think some of these protesters are spontaneous and organic and sincere. Some, I think, are connected to Russia.
Allegations of Russian involvement in American politics entered the mainstream media discourse during the 2016 election cycle, when the Russian government intervened to bolster Trump's campaign and undermine voters' faith in the electoral system. Russian interference included a social media campaign of bots and troll farms, with Russian state-owned media outlets like RT, that's Russia Times, and Sputnik assisting in the dissemination of propaganda. The Mueller investigation later revealed that although the Trump campaign welcomed Russian interference and expected to benefit from it, there was not sufficient evidence to prove that the Trump campaign coordinated or conspired with the Russian government to influence the elections. During the 2020 election cycle, Russia aimed to intensify the conflicts between white supremacists and Black Lives Matter activists, creating context that aimed to push these groups into taking increasingly radical action. This is all old news that has been ceaselessly debated and picked apart by media outlets in their coverage of the 2016 and 2020 election cycles. What is key to this story is that one of the aims of Russian disinformation campaigns and hacking campaigns was to erode voters' faith in America's electoral system. With Trump questioning the outcome of the 2020 election, and with a large portion of Trump voters believing that Biden stole the election, it appears that Russians were successful beyond their wildest dreams. Perhaps an unintended consequence of the Russian interference campaigns is its effects on Nancy Pelosi and activist movements. Russian interference in 2020 allowed American political leaders to attribute domestic racial tensions to foreign influence rather than address it as a product of America's legacy of colonialism and slavery. This engenders paranoia in political figures who can now suspect that any criticism they face may be foreign propaganda rather than a legitimate constituent's concern. In so doing, it also undermines the agendas of activist groups. It enables political leaders to dismiss dissent as a product of foreign influence. So let's come back to Pelosi and the protesters in front of her house. When Pelosi yelled at protesters to, quote, go back to China, she may have been referring to an article published by the New York Times that exposed the ties between Code Pink, that's the activist organization, and the Chinese CCP propaganda effort. Code Pink began as a group of feminist anti-war activists focusing on issues like the use of drone strikes, the Guantanamo Bay Detention Center, Saudi Arabia's human rights violations, and Palestinian statehood. It was founded in 2002 and led protests against the war in Iraq. Code Pink led a delegation to Iraq in February 2003, just before the American invasion. However, since 2017, Code Pink has received a large amount of its funding from Neville Roy Singham, husband of Code Pink's co-founder, Jody Evans. According to the New York Times, Code Pink once criticized China's rights record, but now defends its internment of predominantly Muslim Uyghurs, which human rights experts have labeled a crime against humanity. To continue, Ms. Evans now stridently supports China. She casts it as a defender of the oppressed and a model for economic growth without slavery or war. Quote, "If the U.S. crushes China," she said in 2021, "it would cut off hope for the human race and life on Earth." She describes the Uyghurs as terrorists and defends their mass detention. "We have to do something," she said in 2021. In the next excerpt from the article, the New York Times puts Singham at the head of China's propaganda efforts in America and around the world as well. It also implies that most American leftists have fallen under the sway of Chinese propaganda. Quote, "Under the rule of Xi Jinping, China has expanded state media operations, teamed up with overseas outlets, and cultivated foreign influencers. The goal is to disguise propaganda as independent content. Mr. Singham's groups have produced YouTube videos that together rack up millions of views. They also seek to influence real-world politics by meeting with congressional aides, training politicians in Africa, running candidates in South African elections, and organizing protests like the one in London that erupted into violence. The result is a seemingly organic bloom of far-left groups that echo Chinese government talking points, echo one another, and are echoed in turn by the Chinese state media." According to the New York Times, these left-wing groups become puppets for the Chinese government, parroting pro-China talking points. While Code Pink may have backing or support from the CCP, this does not mean that the protesters in front of Speaker Pelosi's house are Chinese agents. To tell the protesters to, quote, "go back to China" also shows the true depths of distrust and paranoia American leaders have for China at this moment. Even after President Xi's visit with Biden in San Francisco in November, and with a successful election in Taiwan, it's clear that tensions and suspicion still exists in the top leadership of the two countries. For Pelosi to dismiss American protesters' call for a ceasefire as, quote, "Putin's message" or Chinese propaganda eliminates the need for her to engage with their critiques that America is complicit in Israel's genocide in Gaza. The ability to dismiss constituents' concerns as a foreign influence is a means of silencing dissent. Would this not be the ultimate goal of Russian and Chinese intervention? To create in America the tendency to become more like Russia or China, to give democratically elected leaders the ability to dismiss their constituents' criticisms as foreign meddling. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Wall Street Frontline. Please like and subscribe.